And I'm going to share my screen. All right, do you all see that?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go into slideshow from the beginning. And this is the Town of Upper Marlboro Historical Committee doing an oral history of African American life in the town of Upper Marlboro. The Historical Committee was founded in November of 2012. Its mission for the Town of Upper Marlboro Historical Committee is to research, compile, promote the history of the town, its people, and its government. This is an aerial view of the town of Upper Marlboro in 1967. I'd like to do some introductions of our guests. I'm Patty Calicott. I'm the chairperson of the Historical Committee. I'd next like to introduce Evelyn Stevens as vice chairperson. Evelyn,
Hello.
want to tell us a little bit about how you are involved with the town of Upper Marlboro?
Oh my goodness. Well, let me say this.
As vice chairperson to
As
start.
vice chairperson, I became, I was appointed by the chair and the commissioners of the town of Upper Marlboro as the vice chair to the historical committee, town of Upper Marlboro Historical Committee. And I took it on because I love the town of Upper Marlboro. Now, Patty, is this just an introduction or would you like me to go a little further?
We just want to know who you are, and then we'll start the conversations of all of the things that we're going to, the different areas that memories that we're going to talk about.
Okay, so then I can end it with
Well,
this.
how long have you lived in the town?
Okay. I've lived in the town for, well, since I was 10 years old. And so we can say it's been over 60 years. I grew up in the town, and this is a town that I started in 1958, kicking and screaming. But as you can see that I'm still here on Old Mill Road and loving every minute of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, I want to introduce Brian Calicott. He is the archivist and the historian. And Brian, if you'd introduce yourself and give us a brief history of the town.
Sure. Well, I'm Brian Calicott, born and raised in Prince George's County. I have a great deal of interest in history all my life. My grandfather instilled that into me back in the day. He worked for the Park Service at Smoky Mountains National Park, and he did interactive farm museum exhibits dressed up as the old days people in the 1800s. And whenever I went on vacation, I'd go up there and I'd dress up in some old, maybe blue jeans or whatever, and just old type of clothes. And he'd give me a fishing rod. He said, now go fish in the stream. And if anyone asks you a question, just talk to them. So at any rate, I just enjoy history in all aspects. I really like the history that you can touch and feel and look at. But I've started more recently to look at things like the oral histories where you have the conversations with folks. And that's sort of where we are today. And I started with the Upper Marlboro Historical Committee in 2012 at its inception. And I basically have been collecting photographs, oral histories, artifacts of the town in hopes of eventually having some sort of museum or small museum or display for future generations to be able to enjoy what it was like or understand what it was like back in the day. Now, the town itself, not to go too long, existed as sort of a crossroads back in the late 1600s. There was actually a church here. That church had moved to Bladensburg way back in the day. But the town became important as a tobacco port in 1706. Was colonial town. That means this is before the United States. So that they could collect taxes and the king could get his due. Otherwise, you could just sell it off your own wharf and you don't have to pay the king taxes. And that worked out great for the farmer. And they didn't like that. So at any rate, that lasted quite a ways till the Revolution War. And of course, now that we have the United States, things changed a bit. It has been a courthouse down since colonial days. In 1721, they moved the courthouse here. And guess what? We still have a courthouse here today. So that hasn't changed a whole lot. The town is pretty small. The boundaries are small, so it can only hold so many people. And actually, probably back in the day, in the 1800s, it had more people than it does now. The courthouse has grown, the parking lots, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more business-like nowadays than it was in the past when you literally had a house right next to the old courthouse. So times have changed. And if you look at this aerial photograph, you can see where there were some residences right up where there's now a parking lot or a courthouse element. At any rate, that's pretty much the history of the town in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Dave?
Next, I'd like to introduce Pia Jordan.
Hello, my name is Pia Marie Winters Jordan. I arrived in the town of Upper Marlboro in 1958, and I lived there until 1969. My father was the pastor of Union Memorial, I'm sorry, then it was Union Methodist Episcopal Church. And he was assigned from the Virginia Conference. We lived in an area called Gum Springs, Virginia, which was like the Black area in Alexandria. So he pastored that church, Union, from 58 to 69. So I was 2 years old. And it's just interesting, Evelyn and I arrived at the same time, but I was 2 years old when I first arrived to Upper Marlboro.
Thank you. So our first, what we'd like to do is have some of you share your memories of what church life was in the town of Upper Marlboro back when you were growing up here.
Well, you know, it's so interesting that the pictures that I see in front of me show the 3 churches in Upper Marlboro that were so integral to my life, because coming into the town, kicking and screaming in 1958, my family is Catholic. So the church to your left, that's St. Mary's of the Assumption. And that's the church that I attended, and also the school. I attended the church school there. And then my family also were Methodists. So the church in the middle is Union United African Methodist Episcopal Church here, right?
No, it's a Union United Methodist.
Union United Methodist.
We're not A&B.
Yeah, yes, it wasn't A&E?
No, never.
Oh, okay. So this church in the middle, where Pierre's father was the pastor, and that's where I know most of my life as him being the pastor. But my mother's family, of course, she brought us here when my mother and father separated. But before they separated, I came to visit family on Sundays, during the summers, and especially during the summers, we always were at the Bible school. And so my life was not only Catholic, but it was also Methodist. Now, then later on with Trinity, the picture on the right-hand side, that's Trinity. And I would say in my late 20s, early 30s, I would visit the Trinity Church as a member of their Weight Watchers Club. So they had a Weight Watchers Club that I would attend. I'm sure it was in my late 20s, 30s, because I was very concerned about my weight during that time. And I would visit the church then. So, and I consider myself, after I turned 18, I became interdenominational. So this is proof to the pudding that, yes, I embrace all denominations.
Well, as a preacher's kid, you know, I spent a lot of time in the Methodist church, but let me start with St. Mary's, the Catholic church. I have this one memory because you have to understand this was in the 1960s, and the priest there invited my father, who was the Methodist pastor, and my mother, um, and me to have dinner with him. And I guess we were in the rectory. And for that period of time, I guess that was his way of kind of reaching out. But I went to school with some families who were also members, who were Catholics. And the Hensons, I would know that Evelyn's brother, he wasn't going to the public school I was attending. He would be going to St. Mary's Catholic school. Then some of my classmates in elementary school, they were Catholic. And I believe we're talking about the the Curtis family, the Pinckney family, Greenfield families.
Pia,
They
I'm
came
going to
out of-
interrupt you for a minute. There looks
Mhm.
like somebody's trying to come into this meeting. While you're talking, they keep overgoing your thing. I might have to start this over again. I got to
This
figure
is
out who.
Debbie. This is Debbie Selman. Debbie and Minnie.
Oh, okay, great. Deborah, thank you for coming.
No
Yeah.
problem.
So I don't have a video of you. All I have is a phone number.
Correct.
Okay, so Deborah, thank you for being here. We've gone through the introductions, but I'd like you to do a brief introduction on who you are and how you are part of the town of Upper Marlboro.
My name is Deborah Selman. Call me Debbie, and my sister Minnie Selman. I am a member of. We are a member of Union United Methodist Church, and always have been a member since we were little children. I'm familiar with Upper Marlboro because I'm born and raised in Upper Marlboro. We knew Sugar Hill. We knew Pia's dad was our pastor. I knew Mrs. Henson, who was a church member of ours. Evelyn, I knew Evelyn, and Terry, Evelyn's daughter, was a member of our church also. Evelyn and Terry are our relatives. We are cousins. So we know quite a bit about Upper Marlboro just by way of our parents taking us into the town of Upper Marlboro. So that's how we are affiliated with Upper Marlboro.
Awesome, thank you so
And
much.
I am a certified lay minister at Union United Methodist Church also.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask everyone, if you're not talking, to please be on mute because we do want to record as you're speaking and not have somebody else popping in and out while you're talking. Okay, if you don't mind. Please remember to unmute when you do want to talk though. Thanks. All right. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Pia. You want to go back?
All right. So I'll start talking about church life again.
Yes, thank you.
Because everyone was talking about St. Mary's Catholic Church. My memory of St. Mary's is going to the rectory where my father, my mother, and I had been invited by the priest to have dinner. And I guess that was his way of reaching out during integration. And so I remember, I can't remember what we ate, but I remember going into the rectory at that church. Also, Trinity, that's where my Girl Scout troop met. So that's the only familiarity I had with that church, going into maybe their rec room or their basement for our Girl Scout meetings. And of course, as I said, I was the preacher's kid at the Union from 58 to 1969 until my father was then transferred to another church in Prince George's County. But Evelyn, I have to also mention this. I used to have a ball during vacation Bible school. I mean, we would have a lesson, we got to go outside and play, and then we had refreshments. And that's one of the fondest memories I had. Right, Evelyn?
That's right. That's right, Pia. The refreshments was the best. And the crafts. Remember, we would do crafts. Do you remember Mrs. Perry?
Perry.
Debbie,
Name sounds familiar, but I can't.
Debbie, do you remember Mrs. Perry?
Is that Mrs. Perry?
Yeah, well, that her mother, Sis Perry's mother, I can't remember her first name. Sis Perry was my godmother. Her and my mother were great friends, and so they were my godmother. Sis Perry was my godmother. Her given name was Arnetta Perry. And
Yes.
and so, but her mother, she, during my time, she was our our church school teacher, and she was tough as nails. And that's what I remember about the church school. Also, was I think her name was Helen Perry. Her first name was Helen Perry. Yes.
So I've put some pictures up here of Union United, what it looked like when before
I
it was
was
expanded.
there. I was a
Right.
little kid.
And to the left, the bottom corner, that was Trinity on a dirt road.
Before my time.
Yeah, before all of our time.
Mine too, Pia.
And then I believe that's your father, Pia?
Yes, and can I mention one thing about this picture? You know, the courthouse is where people had to come to get their marriage licenses. But some of the people who would have been married by a judge, they wanted to be married by a minister. So the courthouse would send them down to our house for their ceremonies. And so I believe this is after my father had done one of the marriage ceremonies. And if you remember now, Old Mill Road, where the parsonage was, is right behind me. But it was a rancher. We lived in a rancher. So when you go in the door, it's like a big room for a living room and dining room. And then down the hall are your bedrooms and bathroom. Well, whenever they had a marriage ceremony, and sometimes they would bring a bunch of people to be witnesses. So my mother and I, we had to stay in the back. We couldn't get out. So if we needed to go to the place, we were kind of limited. But then my father would have me come out at the end of the ceremony, and I would say, may your home be a haven of blessing and a place of peace. Now, keep in mind, I was just a little kid, so I guess that was supposed to be cute. And I hope the marriages lasted. But yeah, that picture, that's what was happening there. And then the church, when you saw the church earlier, the newer version with the classrooms and all, that was the property of the Buck family. There were the great-grandparents Buck, the grandparents Buck, the parents Buck. And as you see, the white now, that was what it looks like now. And so that property, it took a while before the church could buy that property so that they could expand. And one other thing about that, I was reviewing something, and Evelyn and Debbie, you may be able to remember this. I wasn't living in Upper Marlboro then. We had moved on, but there was a robbery at the church during a church service. And I believe that happened in the around 60s. Well, no, in the 60s, 70s or 80s.
No, I don't. Well, you know, in the 70s, I was in college, and the late 70s and late 60s, early 70s, and I remember your principal. Well, we'll talk about that later, but you have a very nice article of the principal when you were in school, and she went to Hampton Institute. Now it's called Hampton University, but when I was going there, it was Hampton Institute also here. So that article brought back memories. Yes.
So I'm going to ask Debbie if
Yes.
yeah, I'm going to ask you to give me a since you've been with the church since it was built. Can you give me, I know there's a cemetery up on Valley Lane. Can you give me a little bit of history of that cemetery? And also a little bit from your church as well.
All I know that the church does have a cemetery down on Valley Lane. I'm not too familiar with it. I don't know too much information about it. I know it was maintained by the trustees of the church. You know, when the church was built, and since it's been there, the trustees would keep the land up, and they would go down there and clean it and make sure that you could see the markings of the graves and stuff like that. But like I said, I do not remember too much of it. I remember going down and seeing it, but that's about all I know about the church's cemetery.
Okay.
You know, I was surprised. My father took me down to the cemetery once. I believe he was the one. And we kind of drove down. I didn't realize that Union had a cemetery. It was not something that, you know, that there would be programs down there or memorial services. But the fact was, there was a property. I just was wondering, you know, why I wasn't closer to the church. But anyway, that's my memory of the
So
cemetery.
there used to be a church and a school for African Americans down on Valley Road.
Yeah, that was
Valley
way
Lane.
before our time.
Okay.
I do remember the cemetery, Pierre and Debbie. And when I came in 58, the Curtises, you mentioned the Curtises, and they were, again, my best friends. And I would visit them. I would go down Valley Lane to visit them every day, and especially during the summer. And they told me about the cemetery. But that's all I remember. Just the cemetery. The church wasn't there. Now, the church could have been on their property, Patty, you know, where they lived. You know, as you go up the lane to the left, that's where their home was. And I think I saw some pictures, some old pictures, and the church may have been in that area.
So I believe the church and the school was actually where Dee's house currently is now.
Oh, to the right.
To the right, up on that little bit of a hill, yes.
Okay.
I think they said they found a piece of slab from its original where its footings were or something.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Here's some fun stuff. You want to talk about school life?
Well, can I mention one other thing? You see the picture of Old Mill Road?
Yes.
We walked to the church. The church was just around the corner. We could just get there probably in 30 seconds.
Ah.
Exactly right. And going back to church, I know we only have a few minutes, right, Patty? But I wanted to mention about my daughter and my son, because, you know, they grew up in Upper Marlboro also, and they're not here. And Debbie could probably, you know, tack on some information about that part of their lives. But when my mother died, their grandmother, she was very instrumental in the church. And Terry grew up in the church in Union, and my son was very, you know, like, I don't want to go to church. It was so hard for him to get to church, and everyone in the church was trying to get me to, you know, give him some impetus to go to church. And I said, you know, let him be. When the time comes, he will be in the church. Well, let me tell you, he has his master's in divinity, and he started a church some years ago. So those days that he was such a bad boy in the church, he's now a good man. So I just had to mention that the church never gave up on him, you know. And of course, Terry is still in the church, right, Debbie?
Yes.
When she comes in, she tries to make it to church.
One other thing about the church, if you all remember, and you see all the flowers on Old Mill Road, okay, in the front of Union, there was a flower bed. My father would plow, plant flowers. It was his thing. I don't know, his father was a farmer, so he would plant, but he would have on like a work jumper, but underneath the jumper, he'd have on a tie and a shirt. And I always ask him, Daddy, why aren't you dressed like that? He said, you never know when, you know, he would be called to do something formal, so he was going to be prepared.
Oh, Lord.
Mhm.
All right, here we go.
And
I'm sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
Pia, that flower bed is still there today. They still work that flower bed.
Is anybody taking care of it?
Yes,
Oh, good,
they're still taking care of it.
good. Now, since we are here, let me, because I had my elementary school days, and actually, this was during just before I guess the school, some of the schools were integrated. I attended, I guess, first of all, Frederick Douglass High School and had kindergarten probably in the early 60s. Now, it wasn't a formal sort, and Patty, you might have to tell me if one of these buildings is that, but as you see where you see the where it says moving forward, that was Frederick Douglass Elementary School. And I attended Frederick Douglass from first grade to second grade.
The
Now,
red building?
the red building on the right. Now,
Gotcha.
what happened is, see, we were segregated. Marlboro Elementary, which you see on the left where it says school life, the black and white picture,
Uh-huh.
that was literally pretty much in Evelyn and our backyards. I mean, we could walk to Marlboro Elementary, but my mother wouldn't allow me to attend Marlboro and go into an integrated situation until I learned to read and write. And what's so funny, I was looking at a video of my aunt. She was talking about how my father was hot when they tried, when I was in third grade, to register me and the Browns, and there were a few other of us, African Americans. We were like test cases for integration from Marlboro Elementary. And so my mother, first of all, and she was a nurse, she had to get to work. She was working at the St. Elizabeth in DC as a psychiatric nurse. So she had to get to work. So she took me, Beverly Brown, Lynn Brown, up to the school. And I think Mrs. Brown, I think she might have been there too, to register us. But the secretary said we were too late. We could not be registered. Now, my mom was pretty a calm woman, very soft spoken. She was hot. I could tell she was upset. So she took us back down to my father. And my aunt said, yeah, his name was John. Yeah, John got you all, and he took you up to the school and he talked to the principal. And the principal was, I believe it's Lawrence Calabucci or Mr. Calabucci. We had no trouble getting in then. So we were the test case, just a few of us,
Debbie, can
for
you
what
mute,
time in.
please? All right, Pia, do you want to try talking now? I'm sorry, she kept popping in while you were talking, and I wanted to make
Okay.
sure we had you there.
So what part did you miss any?
Well, I got it. I
what
just
thing?
didn't have you on the screen most of the time while you were talking because she was
Oh,
making
okay.
noise.
All right, well, then as you see, the two schools, elementary schools were segregated up until, and I just have to, like the mid 60s.
Yes,
Um,
1964 was
okay,
when
all
Jim
right.
Crow ended.
Okay, so it was kind of interesting because Princeton County was the county seat, and I don't know if it was because like some of the parents didn't want us to integrate the schools yet. Like I told you, my mother didn't want me to go in until I had learned to read and write. Because, and I guess we can talk about it later because I think there's another picture where you actually see teachers and all. But
Mhm.
it was an interesting time moving from Frederick Douglass Elementary to Marlboro Elementary. So I went from riding a bus, because we were bused a couple miles, to Frederick Douglass Elementary, but we walked when we got to go to Marlboro Elementary.
You had the choice though to go to Marlboro Elementary?
I believe my mother delayed my entrance into Marlboro until I could read and write.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, and so Pia was going to elementary school. I was at the time of segregation. She was in the elementary school. I was in high school. And so you see the picture that's right next to, in between Marlboro Elementary School and Frederick Douglass Elementary School. That school in the middle, that's Frederick Douglass Junior Senior High. Well, now it's Frederick Douglass High School. And that's where I was bused to school. And not only was I bused to school, which was only, it's like 5 miles from here, but all of the African Americans in the county, they either went to Frederick Douglass or they went to Fairmont High School. And so I had friends who lived in Accokeek, and because of, I guess, districting, they ended up at Frederick Douglass. But they were bused that far away. They had to get up like 4 o'clock in the morning to be able to have their first class at 7:30. I was a little lucky. I didn't have to get up quite so early to get to school, but they had to get up very, very early before segregation ended.
And I attended Frederick Sasser Junior Senior High in 1968 to 1969. I was in the 7th grade. That's when junior high started. So when I entered junior high, because we had gone through integration then,
Yes.
and so it was integrated. Mr. Peterson was our vice principal, and the reason why I remember him is because his sister went to nursing school with my mother in Richmond, Virginia. It's interesting, you found out things about different family members and whatever. So, and the Cumbos, Benjamin Cumbo was the physical education teacher at Frederick Sasser. I was in the band, wasn't as good as Frederick Douglass though, and Evelyn will have to tell you about Douglass. Our band was dry. It was so dry. But I was third trumpet, so you know I wasn't playing that well. But when they had parades, Douglass would have been the one to go to. And before though integration, I guess they were an all-Black band.
Yes. Yes, and we were known all over the area, and we were invited to the World's Fair, New York World's Fair. We'll never forget that. It was so exciting to be a marching member during that time. Yes. So oh yes, and so I was reading that article here, and I saw where, you know, it talked about Mrs. Benjamin Young being the principal of the Marlboro Elementary School, and well, not Marlboro, but Frederick Douglass. And I call Marlboro Elementary the Black Marlboro Elementary and the White Marlboro Elementary the same, but they're different names. But it's so interesting to see that she went to Hampton Institute and she graduated from Frederick Douglass also. I didn't know her, but I'm sure that she was a great teacher.
Yeah, she was a great principal, and she was there at a time when the integration of I have to ask my husband to close the door. So anyway, I'm sorry. Well, anyway, as I was saying, after I got distracted, she was principal at a time when there was that transition, when Frederick Douglass became integrated, Marlboro Elementary became integrated, because after we had the test case where just handful of us were there, then, and that was 3rd grade. And if you see the bottom picture, that's my 3rd grade picture. And if you see me, I'm in the 2nd row. I mean, the standing, I'm in the, from the top, I'm in the 2nd row, 4th from the left. And I'm the only one of color in that class. And that was when I was in 3rd grade. And that's when was only about 5 or 6 of us at the school. So Mrs. Young, there was a transition for her too, and Mr. Calabucci, because we were bringing, the 2 schools were now split, and they were integrated. So I'm sure she had to go through some things. And one of the things I did mention to you all that was it was a serious situation. The music teacher, Mrs. Green from Frederick Douglass, she was at Frederick Douglass. Some of the white children who were waiting for the bus to come to Marlboro Elementary, there was an accident and she hit them. And so they were, we knew, you know, between the two schools, we all knew what was going on. And at Marlboro Elementary, you know, they lived, but there were some serious injuries. Now, if you see the top picture there, those are some of my friends from Marlboro Elementary. I took a lot of pictures. Them Audrey Ostreicher, oh goodness, I can't remember. Henrietta Butler is the third, and I think that's Beverly Brown up there. But the picture next to with the woman in the pink, that was my 5th grade picture. And as Patty brought to my attention, you see, I'm the only African-American in 3rd grade. Because basically there was only a group of us. Then by the time 5th grade rolled around, you see we were mixed. Now, there was an attitude, I believe, among some of the teachers, and I'm not saying these teachers, but like kind of, I don't know, looking down on the African-American children. I can't prove it, but there was a certain air. But I will say, Mrs. Watson, who was in my 3rd grade teacher, the brother of one of the little boys on the playground called me the N-word. And so my classmates, they were upset. This one classmate couldn't wait to tell the teacher. And so she went over, I guess, to the other classroom where this little boy was, and she made him, I remember this, she made him come over and apologize to me. But it was really interesting that there were other white children who were concerned about what he had said to me.
Was there a lot of conflict, or was this just one instance?
This basically was just one instance for me. I talked to one of my schoolmates, African-American schoolmates, who was part of the trial period. And it seemed like one of the teachers who wasn't her teacher would invite her, even though she was supposed to, my friend was supposed to go home right after school, but it was almost like she would have her come into her classroom to help, you know, clean off the board or do those things. And I think it was a way of kind of keeping her in her place by doing that. And I won't say the name of the teacher, but many of you probably already know. But you know, this Upper Marlboro had some old, I will say old families, you know, who had been there probably forever, and it was a class sort of thing, you know, maybe the haves, the have-nots, blacks and whites.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much, that was only the one experience I had. Anything else, we were kids playing. Some kids would get in a fight and it would be cousin against cousin. It wasn't anything racial.
Well, you know, in high school, to show the difference, in high school, there was not a lot of conflict with the desegregation. The only thing that I remember was, number one, the band. The band changed a little bit because we didn't have that, you know, that soul anymore all the way. And it occurred in my last 2 years of high school, where, you know, the change occurred. But I also remember us girls, and this is funny, but this is what we thought about. All of the girls, all the white girls were trying to get the black boys. And we were mad about that. And so our African-American friends who were males, you know, they were walking down the hall with the Caucasian girls, and they had books and carrying their books to class. But other than that, we had there was not conflict with the desegregation. I must admit that was something to be proud about, because in so many areas of the country, there were a lot of fights, a lot of conflicts.
Did Debbie go to school in the town of Upper Marlboro?
Yeah, is she on the line? Yeah, she went to Marlboro Elementary and Frederick Douglass.
Yes, I went to Marlboro Elementary, and I went there from first grade to fifth grade, I believe. And then we transferred from Marlboro Elementary. Then there was a new school, Patuxent Elementary, in Marlboro. What is it?
Marlton?
Marlboro Meadows. No,
Oh,
Marlboro Meadows. Yeah, that was the new elementary school. So we were transferred. I think our class was the last class at at Marlboro Elementary, and transferred to Patuxent Elementary. That's where I went to elementary school. High school, junior high school, I went to Frederick Sasser, and I stayed in Frederick Sasser up until high school. High school, we went, was from 9th grade to the 11th grade. I'm sorry, 10th grade to 12th grade. So that was Frederick Douglass High School I went to in Croom, Maryland.
Oh, Debbie,
So
what
one
year did you
thing about-
graduate?
I'm sorry?
What year did you graduate high school?
I graduated in 1977.
Okay.
so that's. I'm sorry.
So you went through the desegregation as well.
Yes.
Do you want to share any memories?
I had a lot of, I can remember in elementary school, I had a lot of friends who were white. We got along fine. I got along fine with my white friends through elementary all the way through high school. They would sometimes, if someone picked on me, maybe when I was in junior high school, some of my white friends would take up for me. But other than that, we really didn't have any problems when I was in high school and I can remember also back in junior high school, I had two white teachers, which they were my physical education teachers, who really took an interest in me. They wanted to know if I wanted to go into physical education. Once I graduated from high school, they would pay for my education, but that was something I was not interested in going into physical education. But I had excellent years when I was in school. And I also went to Douglass Elementary, but I went there for a short period of time. Like I said, school was really interesting for me. I had a good time, good teachers. Pia was talking about Calabucci. I remember him as being the principal at Frederick Sasser, I believe. He transferred to Frederick Sasser. I remember him being there. But school was good. School was good.
Let me mention one thing about Marlboro Elementary too. We had eyes at Marlboro Elementary. The Brown family, the two girls who first went with me into Marlboro Elementary to help desegregate it in the 60s, their mother worked in the cafeteria. So we had eyes there. My mother became secretary in the PTA. So our families participated in some way at Marlboro Elementary. So there were eyes there just in case.
Yes, exactly. Now, so Pia and Debbie, speaking in terms of Marlboro Elementary and Douglass Elementary, Tony, we went to St. Mary's of the Assumption, and he went to the newer school. And the picture at the bottom, that's picture at the bottom of the screen, that's where I went to school. as African American. And the picture that's just below the yearbook is where the white kids went to school, but a few Black kids could go to that school if they were deemed to be smart enough, and your parents were asked, which school did you want to go to? So when I came in 1958, my friends, especially the Curtises, they said, they're going to ask you, do you want to go to the white school or the Black school? You tell them that you want to go to the Black school. So of course I got the heads up. So I ended up in the Black school. But now that I think about it, I should have gone to the white school. They had an hour of recreation. We only had 30 minutes of recreation. And another thing about that school, where and both schools had more than one class that was taught. So it was the fourth, I think it was the fifth, sixth, and seventh were all taught by the same teacher. The fifth, sixth, and seventh, and the fourth and fifth, they were taught by the same teacher. So we all had what you called mixed education back there in the 60s, the early 60s, late 50s.
Did you feel that your teachers were substandard in the Black school versus the white school, or do you think the education was even?
I think the education was a little uneven because I felt that, as I said earlier, when I came to the school, I was a year ahead of my class. Now, I'm not sure that the kids who were in the white school were on the same level as I. I have a suspect that they were on the same level as I coming into the elementary school in the fifth grade. So I was the smartest kid at the time for that first year. I felt good. I knew all the answers to all the classwork that we had. But just to mention,
do you think they were dumbing it down because of the desegregation?
I may think that they were dumbing it down. You don't really think about it at the time, of course, as a young child. But now that I think about it as an adult, yeah, I do believe that. Mm-hmm. That's a very good observation. When I went to school in DC, it was integrated, and that's why I had no idea. I had no concept of Jim Crow when I came to Upper Marlboro. I understood it later, but I had no idea of segregation, integration. Those words did not exist for me growing up until I came to Upper Marlboro.
Really?
You mentioned about the teachers. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why my mother didn't have me go into Marlboro Elementary, first grade, second grade, she wanted to make sure I got to learn to read and write. But I have to mention my teacher, Christine Henry. She was Catholic. And the reason I'm saying that, I remember when President Kennedy was assassinated, she was at her desk and they made the announcement that he had been assassinated, and she was crying. And I said, she's crying because she's Catholic and President Kennedy was Catholic. So that doesn't have anything to do with our subject at hand. But the teachers, you just felt that the teachers maybe cared about, the African-American teachers cared about the African-American children and pushed us more so than we might have gotten initially from Marlboro Elementary. Now that's something that can't be proven necessarily, but it's like, and this is kind of off the subject too, my mother was a Tuskegee Airman nurse with the Tuskegee Airmen. And one of the things one of the airmen told me is he was glad that they had Black nurses taking care of them there, because the Black nurses could only take care of Black military people and German prisoners. And he said he felt that the Black nurses wouldn't push us aside, would take care of us because they cared about us as we cared about them. And which he was saying that the white nurses probably would not have cared about them as much. And I believe that is what's happened. And even as the years progressed, I think you saw the African-American teachers in school, they were trying to really push the African-American students to excel. And that might not have been the case with some white teachers. And it wasn't necessarily because they were trying to dumb them down, but instead of pushing excellence, they were like, oh, these poor Black kids, you know, we got to give them a better chance or whatever. But the Black teachers were on you and they were trying to get you to move ahead.
That's
So I
a
think in
very,
some ways that happened.
that's a very good observation, Pierre. I think that you're right, because I can remember in high school, we had Black and white teachers. And of course, prior to segregation, yes, the Black teachers were very hard on us, especially my English teachers. My English teachers were horrible. And they would, I don't know whether any of you have ever heard this statement before, but they would always say, if we didn't feel like, you know, we wanted to learn, they would say, look, I got mine, you got yours to get. That was a famous saying in the Black community. And but yes, I do believe that we felt that we were cared for more. But I remember having a debate teacher, and she was just as passionate about our learning as any of the Black teachers. So it's I think it's discretionary. I think it depends on the environment of that teacher and how they grew up as to their perception of African Americans. Yeah.
Evelyn, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You, after you left Douglas, you went to an HBCU, a historically
Yes.
Black college,
Yes.
university. Why after did you go to an HBCU rather than a traditionally white institution?
It's a very good question, Pierre. Well, for one, my mother and Mrs. Smith, the high school physical education teacher, they were great friends. And they really wanted me to go to a historical Black college. They wanted me to go to Hampton Institute. And I went there to visit, and I fell in love with Tidewater area. Now, I had gotten scholarships to Big Ten, got to Michigan, got scholarships to Florida A&M, but I picked the one school that I didn't get a scholarship to. I picked that school mainly because of Mrs. Smith and my mother wanted me to go there. And we had it was 1% white. And I made a comment that was racist. As a Black young lady, I made a racist comment to a white student, the one white student we had at Hampton Institute. And she reamed me out. And I realized that, you know, racism can go both ways. And she taught me something. And I never made a racist comment after that. But yeah, I went mainly Pierre because of my mother, Mrs. Smith.
All right, we're gonna move.
May I say something? This is Debbie.
Absolutely.
I failed to make mention that when I was in elementary and junior high school, I had white teachers that took interest in me, to the fact they even would want me to go home with them on the weekends. So I went and stayed with at least two of my teachers I remember, Miss Fitzwater and Mrs. Barrows. They really took interest in me as a Black child. I would go and stay with them, and it was really nice to know that I had a white teacher that was interested in me. And then, like I said, during my junior high time when I was in school, I had two teachers who were in that was teaching sports. They wanted me to go into after graduating from high school, they wanted me to go into physical education, but I didn't want to go into physical education. But it was really interesting to me that they took not only myself, but they took a couple other young Black students that they had in their class to take with them over the weekend to their homes. I remember going down to Chesapeake Beach, along the waterfront, and spending time down there with one of my teachers. And it was really nice to see that and to be able to have, someone who would take interest in us. So that was my elementary school years. And in high school, I had another teacher who was a physical education teacher who was really took interest in me also. I played basketball. I played basketball and volleyball. She was my basketball and volleyball coach. And it was really interesting also to see that they took interest in us during that time.
Debbie mentioned earlier about having white friends in elementary school. That is one time where I, for the first time, got invited to the white children's house for sleepovers. And in later years, I learned, I think my mother was uncomfortable, but then the children also came over to our house. So things worked out. I got to see, they lived in a part of town not too far, and Evelyn might have to where this area was called, not too far from the new St. Mary's School down that same road. I forgot the name of the development, but we lived in different parts. They were on the outskirts of Upper Marlboro. Evelyn and I lived in the town of Upper Marlboro. So I got to see another part of the town.
Off of Bach Road, I think it's called. Brock Road. Mm-hmm.
It was a Brock Hall Estate.
Brock Hall Estates, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about, have you guys ever seen this? This is what it looked like back in 1940s.
I was going to say, Patty, that that looks like before my time, but I tell you, it hasn't changed much in all those years. It's just beginning to change, isn't it? Because you see, the bank on the corner is now M&T Bank, and Magruder's is now the coffee house.
Yep.
And
isn't that the old post office?
The old post office,
which is the library. Yeah.
The library, and then to the right, the Five and Dime and the pharmacy. They looked a little different when I was going in there getting that candy. But not much has changed in all these years. It's just beginning to, though. The
Yeah, I
Sassa
believe that
building.
was Anton Nimmerrichter is the name of the guy who had part of that store.
Really?
He was the what?
The Five and Dime store. Anton Nimmerrichter. The name's cut off on the Coca-Cola sign up there.
Yeah. Yeah, they had some good, the Five and Dime, you could get some penny candy. That was good. And one thing Evelyn brought up in talking to her in the past, there was no lunch counter in either the department store or the Five and Dime when I was growing up, but I understand that there was at one time.
Yes. When I was growing up, there was a lunch and again in the late 50s when I first came into Upper Marlboro, like I said earlier, I did not know there was a differentiation between Black and white. We in DC we meld together somehow, but when I came in Upper Marlboro, we could sit at, well, let's say it like this. In DC, you could sit at a counter, Woolworths and GC Murphy. You could sit at any counter and have a nice soda, ice cream soda. But I was told by my friends, again, the Curtises and the Owens, they said, you can't just go in here and sit at the counter. I said, what? I want to get a soda. So I sat down at the counter and they told me, oh, they're not going to wait on you. And sure enough, I sat down and they did not wait on me. They ignored me. So I sat there for a while and then I got up. They said, you know how you can get your soda? Go to the end of the counter and they will wait on you. And that's what I did to get my soda. I went to the end of the counter and ordered a carry out. Now, this was just before segregation ended. And I remember, I didn't mention this before, but when segregation ended, all my friends, the Owens, the Curtises, we all got together and we went to the Five and Dime and sat down at the counter and we all were waited on. No problem at all. And that was a really good feeling for us to be able to sit at that counter after we were denied service for so many years. Because, African Americans, especially in the town, we could not go in the front to get things. We could get food and anything we wanted, but we had to go to the back of the building. We could go to the movie house, but we had to go outside and go up the fire escape to get to see a movie. We had to sit in the balcony. And those are the things that I do remember about Jim Crow that I'm glad that they're no longer, that Jim Crow is no longer around for that. But yeah, just some of the memories. I don't think Pia and Debbie had to worry about going up the fire escape. Because I don't even think that by the time you were able to go to the movie, I think they had closed the movie. I think they closed the movie down, right?
Probably. See, I was just a little girl, so my parents weren't going to let me go to movies anyway.
And that building
And
still
I don't
exists.
even remember the theater or anything like that.
Yeah, they closed it down and it became the newspaper office, I
Yep, the
believe.
Gazette. And if you go look on the side of the building, you can see where that fire escape and the stairs were in the doorway. But it's bricked off.
Amazing.
Well, Evelyn, you mentioned about the lunch counter earlier. It wasn't there when I was going in later in the 60s and getting candy. So you all got to sit there. So what happened to the lunch counter?
They took it down. They got rid of that lunch counter after we had our chairs though. We got in there. But yeah, it lasted for a short period of time. Yeah. Yeah, they closed it down.
And Pia, where did you get your candy?
Candy from the Five and Dime, and I missed my bus to Frederick Douglass Elementary School because I was debating. One of my neighbors who also attended the school was saying, talking about getting some candy, and so I debated, and that's on the corner where that our bus picked us up at the corner was at Main Street where the bank was. So we were waiting, and I said, okay, I ran over and got the candy from the Five and Dime, and I looked, and my bus was going down the street, and so I had to walk home. I mean, I lived right down the street, but I had to walk home and let my father know that I got left because I was running across the street to get candy, and so that was a moment of shame.
Pia, I think you probably didn't get candy from Mr. Diggs, did you? Because I think Mr. Diggs, what about Mr. Buck? Did you ever go to?
See, those Buck store and Mr. Diggs, they were farther than I would have been allowed to probably walk. Since I was still young, I could go down in the town because it was, hop, skip, and jump from our street, our road.
Right.
But to go to those other places, no.
Right.
I knew they were there, but I by myself, I wouldn't be hanging there.
Exactly. And then it was on my way home because from school, we would stop at Mr. Diggs and get our candy from Mr. Diggs. And then when his store closed, we went to Mr. Buck and they got our candy from Mr. Buck. By the time we got to the 5 and dime, we were full. We ain't got nothing. Debbie, do you remember Mr. Diggs?
No, I'm afraid I don't remember Mr. Diggs. We went on the outskirts of Upper Marlboro to a store, a little country store called Merton Cole. And we would go there and get our penny candy. But I do remember going into the 5 and dime store and getting penny candy out of there. But Mr. Bucks and Mr. Diggs, I don't remember them.
Okay.
Well, what about, I don't know if this is the proper time to mention this because this is around the town. What about Brick Inn?
Oh yeah, Brick Inn was a great place to get food. Again, to go into Brick Inn, you had to go in the back, and they had good food. The food was delicious, but again, you could not walk in the front. You had to go around the back.
Well, my memory of Brick Inn was that it was a lot of hell raising down at Brick Inn at
That's
night. I guess it was night. I think one of our neighbors had a renter, and I remember he got stabbed down at Brick Inn. I think at night things changed than during the day.
Yes, that's where they got their liquor. You know, that's where and those people that went to Brick Inn, they were older than myself, because by that time I was mostly in college, but and before that, I was too young to even just get your food and go home, Evelyn. But that's where the tobacco circuit guys would get their liquor, from Brick Inn.
And
They
it's
couldn't
now
go
a
to
full
the
supply
liquor
store
store.
next to the Marlboro Tire and Auto.
Yeah, now
Funny
it's
how
a
things
supply
change.
store. Mhm.
And it was a flower shop for a really long time.
Yes, and my brother, he worked there. He worked for the flower store, and he couldn't, and they loved him, but he couldn't continue to work there because he had terrible allergies, and he had to, stop working. Yeah, I can't remember the name of that flower store now.
It was Karen's, I believe, Karen's flower shop.
It was
speaking about, I don't remember.
I can't
Speaking
remember.
about Brick Inn,
Yes.
Speaking about Brick Inn, back in the 70s, 80s, my mom used to cook down there when it turned from the liquor store. She used to cook in Brick Inn. She would go down there and spend during the weekend. She would go Friday, Saturday, and sometimes on Sunday. She would serve dinners, and she would have sandwiches, and she had pig feet and fried chicken and fish and potato salad and greens.
That's what I remember, Debbie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I'd known. Another thing, because eating out down in Upper Marlboro, if we were to eat out, I think we went farther. The restaurant I remember was Cleo's restaurant on 301 that served African Americans. One of the young ladies I went to elementary school with, Darcia Greenfield, she lived there, and I would always admire her because she'd come to Douglas Elementary with these beautiful sandwiches, lettuce and tomato cut in this white wax paper, and I was peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, Cleo's was the favorite too. Yeah, we like to go to Cleo's as high school students and
Where was
young
that
adults.
located?
Where Mrs. K's is now. As a matter of fact, Cleo had it for all those years, and she sold it to the proprietor who now is called Mrs. Case.
Ah,
And she put the Cleo put the lodge, it's a lodge attached to the restaurant. And also Cleo lived there and she did hair out of there. As we talked about that last time, didn't we, Pia?
Yeah,
Uh,
also downtown Upper Marlboro. Who was it?
Sylvia Mills, what she married a
Sylvia.
Tickles.
Yeah,
Yes.
she did. One thing you all mentioned too, don't want us to get past that, the tobacco barns. I know at least one student we would see in the spring, I guess it was, when the migrant workers came through and they
Mhm.
worked in the tobacco.
Yes, yes. And at the end of the circuit, the tobacco circuit, there was always a big barn dance. And we got ourselves all duded up, as we used to say, and had the best time at the barn dance. And the barn dance commemorated the end of the circuit. And I wanted to ask my mother every year, because this is where the teenagers had an opportunity to make money during the summer by, working the tobacco fields. And my mother would never let me go. She would, but I do remember a lot of my friends, they made a pretty good salary during the summer working the tobacco fields. And there were some, and the cigarette, Marlboro, that's where they got the name for that cigarette from the town of Upper Marlboro. The town of Upper Marlboro was a very, what's the word I want to say? It was one of the big places where you could get a lot of tobacco, because the area had a lot of tobacco fields.
There was a certain kind of tobacco that was really, really considered the top notch, where they'd mix it
Yes.
in with the regular old tobacco from other places.
Yes,
So
it
this was a
was-
preferred, highfalutin
Yes.
tobacco.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that's right. It was very highly regarded. Yep.
Okay, racetrack people. I never got to go to see a horse race, so tell me about the racetrack. It was right down the street, but tell me about it.
Yeah, that's another thing about Upper Marlboro. It was very well known for races, the horse races. And I remember my cousin's father, he would take us down, and he wouldn't tell any of our parents, what was going on, but he snuck us there. But yes, the racetrack was one of the best features about Upper Marlboro. It's the racetrack and the jail. That was what and tobacco. Those are the three things that Upper Marlboro was known for. in at least around the African American community.
Well, since some of these pictures, a lot of them I contributed, so I'll talk real quick. I told you my mother was the assistant Girl Scout leader for the junior Girl Scouts when I was in there. And again, it was probably a situation where she didn't want me to go in there by myself. She wanted to see what was going on. The bottom picture, that was the playground at Marlboro Elementary, and see those steps going down. Evelyn's, I think, brother and Jeannie Buck, who lived on our street, there was like a little metal section that we would ride our bikes through. We could have been killed, but it was on the side of those steps. And it was like, that was just something. What was it, racist? Marlboro, oh, double racist, he's showing something there. So that was good. And then in the middle, these were Marlboro Elementary School students. We got to go on, I believe it was an overnight trip to study ecology. And Mrs. Grover, the woman down there, she was from Idaho. So she was the 5th grade teacher at Marlboro Elementary. And I kept in touch with her for decades. And she went back to live. Her husband was studying law in DC at the time.
Oh my! And Pia, we used to play. I used to take you up to the playground and swing you and the swings and Tony and the swings would play the sliding board
Yeah,
and
that
the
was,
Jenkins.
yeah,
The
that was
Jenkins
Marlboro
would,
Elementary.
yeah,
Marlboro Elementary.
yeah. And
Yeah,
the
but I
Jenkins
got in
would be
trouble.
there.
It wasn't with you. I didn't get in trouble with you, but the Jenkins twins, they
Mhm.
were up there once, and I didn't know how I knew that, but I went up there by myself, just talking to them. But I got in trouble when I got
Mhm.
home.
Yeah.
So how was Marlboro Day and the parades?
Oh my goodness. That what do you want to say, Pia?
Yeah, because I was in one of those parades with a Sasser. We weren't hitting on much, but Douglas, I really missed. I don't know what happened. They put Frederick Sasser in. It was I think the Memorial Day parade, and I remember playing the trumpet. I almost fainted after that performance. But it's. I remember wondering what happened to Douglas for these parades, because it seems like Sasser's band was there, but I don't remember Douglas.
Well, by that time, Douglas had the band had changed tremendously. So Marlboro Day, I guess the first Marlboro Day was what, in the 60s, early 60s, and we were at our high point. Frederick Douglass was at his high point during that time, and so yes, we were the sight to see at Marlboro Day. And then again, remember, after segregation occurred, or let's say integration came into being, things changed a lot. So by the time you remember, Pia, you were in Sasser's band, and Frederick Douglass had changed a lot.
What did you play?
I played the clarinet. I played all three clarinets, the alto and the bass clarinet. And I call myself being first chair. I don't know how I got to be first chair. I play the piano too, Pia. I don't know how. I can't play any one of them now. But yes, it was, again, Frederick Douglass band and Sue Williams. She could play those drums. Oh my goodness. She was a sight to see. To have such rhythm with those drums. I'll never forget that. You and we had
little Susan Williams, little.
When she was a year or two ahead of me.
Oh, okay.
So Mrs. Dade's granddaughter.
Okay.
Sue.
Her daughter was named Susan, but the mother would have been with you. Her name was help me, Debbie. You know Susan Williams' mother's name.
Debbie?
Sandra.
Sandra. That's who I'm saying Sue. I mean Sandra. Sandra is with me. Yes. She's about a year or two ahead of me.
Yeah, because Susan's a little girl. She was younger than I was. So.
Yes. It's Sandra. Sue
we
and
were
Sandra.
all on Old Mill Road. We all lived on Old Mill Road. The Bucks, 3 Bucks families, another white family, Griffins. We were integrated. We had an integrated road. The Parsonage where I lived, the Browns lived there, the Culberts, the Henson, where Evelyn and her family lived, the Dades, which was like 3 generations. You had like 3 generations in your house.
Yes.
The Dades had like 3 generations in their house.
Yes.
And then Jenkins, a white family on the hill next to the school with the German Shepherd dog. I just remember that dog.
Yeah, and Mr. Jenkins was the manager of the Safeway that was in the town, and the Safeway was at the end of Main Street.
Well, A&P.
A&P. I'm saying Safeway. A&P. Yes, that's right. A&P. Boy, I have forgotten more than I remember, Pia.
A lot of time at that A&P because my mother was a coffee drinker and they had They would grind coffee.
Yes. Yeah, and the Safeway is where the gym is now, across the street from Old Brick Inn. That's where the Safeway was.
Yeah, I remember the Safeway too. It's closer to 301. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
So Pia, what you doing here with these boys in the water?
Oh, well, there's one other girl. That was Lisa Miller. She's bending over in there. We were on a, let's see, what it says, Mysteries of the Deep. We were on a trip to study about, I guess, ecology. And I remember it was rainy. I had my little rain outfit on. And so I think it was overnight. I believe it was an overnight trip because as I was telling you all, Marlboro Elementary, we went on overnight trips. We went to Williamsburg. I don't know. I don't think we stayed overnight to New York, the United Nations, went to DC. But that's one thing that I don't think the kids today get to do those sort of things. We went all over the place. And it was because of our teachers, because they had to go with us. And we had planned all these trips.
So the homecomings, did all of you have your high school homecomings, your parades down the town of Upper Marlboro?
No.
I was too young.
No, we didn't have homecoming like that because Frederick Douglass, homecomings basically are football. We didn't have a football team. We had a basketball team and the Douglas Eagles. And the basketball team was, again, okay, But yeah, we didn't have homecomings like that. We had more proms than homecomings in the high school.
I remember now. I remember because I was in 7th grade. It was the older, like the juniors and seniors. I remember a king and a queen. They must have had some sort of dance, but see, I was too little. I mean, I was 7th grade. I was 13 years old. So, but we didn't have things like that. But the older students had that. And Evelyn might remember Tolsons were in school with me. They were seniors. And the Tolson, and Debbie can remind me, Tolson married, Joyce Tolson married,
Joseph Blake.
Yeah, the Blake. He married a Blake. And so I think they were the king and queen. I'm not sure. But yeah, if you were an older, you were involved in stuff like that. 7th graders, we weren't into that.
Right. Yeah, we had our proms. I went to the junior prom twice, the senior prom. By the time I graduated, I was sick of proms. I was a host because we had hostess. The 10th grade was the hostesses, and then you had your junior prom, and then you had your senior prom. So I was a hostess. I went to my junior prom. I was sick of proms by that time.
All right, I'm going to move us along again, and I want some of your memories. I want you guys to give me your, I guess, least fondest memory about the town. And then we'll follow that with your most fondest memories of the town.
Well, that middle picture is when a judge, there was a case in Upper Marlboro and a judge made the comment that all Blacks carry knives. So the NAACP, they had a protest, and that's my father holding the flag in front of the courthouse. And we had some, and Debbie and Evelyn too, you might remember, I believe the Clevelands, and maybe the Masons worked in the courthouse. But as I don't know, we probably were not very well represented working there in the courthouse at that time. We were talking about the 60s. But as you can see, I'm not sure what the judge, after what happened to him, I'm not sure if anything happened to him. I mean, if he was reprimanded or whatever, but on the left,
probably nothing, as you say,
yeah. And then the swimming pool, it's like that was off limits to us. I didn't even, I might have looked over where the swimming pool was in Upper Marlboro, but Blacks didn't go there. So it was like, we would pass it. I drove past it. Riding in the car with my mother, you pass it all the time. But it was like, it's there, but it's not for us.
And again, that was during Jim Crow, and we have to remember segregation, it really kept us apart. And being a Jim Crow town, that's right. Blacks were not allowed at that pool. And I don't know whether we weren't allowed, we just didn't go. We never challenged. We didn't challenge until that day. I told you after 1964, but prior to 1964, there was no challenges. And so you're right, P is right. We just would just go by it and say, boy, that would be nice if we could go and swim in that pool. Debbie, what were your memories about the pool?
I was always told that blacks were not allowed in the pool. So we just didn't bother with it. Like I said, we would ride past it, but we couldn't go into it.
Growing up knowing that, did you feel like you could challenge it, or it was just the way of life?
It was just a life.
Yeah, because I was too young to try to challenge it. My parents didn't bother with it. It was just a way of life for us. We had to accept that. It was just a way of life.
Were there pools available for African Americans?
What we would do is we might go to Sandy Point State Park. That's where African Americans, we could go to the beach. And then, what is it? Carlos Beach?
Sparrows Beach.
Sparrows Beach. And
Sparrows Beach was before 64. So Sandy Point was after 64. Sandy Point was one of the first beaches that allowed African Americans to swim there. And before that, we went to Sparrows and, what's the other one? I can't remember.
Cars. Yeah.
Cars, I think.
That's Sandy Point. You see me in my little swimsuit with my
Oh, and I don't know if any of you remember Glen Echo.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It seemed like when we started going to Glen Echo, it closed. I remember going to the swimming pool there, and not long afterwards, seemed like Glen Echo was closed.
Yes.
And then they made it it was different. Decades later, they made it, I don't know, a park or something.
Yes. And the Ferris wheel was very, that was a popular place to go to, the Ferris wheel at Glen Echo. And I did get a chance to get on the Ferris wheel there. The merry-go-round, not the Ferris wheel, the merry-go-round. Because I couldn't do the Ferris wheel. That was too much for my stomach.
There's a picture of your brick inn.
Yes.
And, I don't know, who is that in that parade?
I'm telling you that this was after I left because I know that it said Frederick Douglass Senior High School. And so prior to that, the banner would be Frederick Douglass Junior Senior High. But I'm telling you, those uniforms are the same. You see how classy they are?
They're awful short.
Well,
the band behind.
But the flag girls, their uniforms were short. And this is something else we talked about last week. Mrs. Smith was our cheerleader coach. I was a cheerleader all through my junior and senior high. So in my junior high years at Frederick Douglass, we had the short skirts. Okay, we were maybe 13, 12, 13. Must be 13, 14. Well, when we became seniors, in the senior high school, we couldn't wear the short skirts. We had to wear the long skirts. The skirts were down to our knees. So when we did the cartwheels, I guess it was a sense of propriety that Mrs. Smith had for us. But yeah, those are fond memories of Frederick Douglass Jr., when I was there.
And
Uh,
I just have to say something. Frederick Sasser, junior, senior high, our band uniforms, even though we didn't play the best, our band uniforms were tough too. And Lynn Brown was was a cheerleader when I was at Sasser. There were only Gail Howell. I don't know if you all remember the Howells. Gail Howell and Lynn Brown were the two African American cheerleaders. Now their skirts pretty much came to their knee.
There's two. I thought we were the only school that had those long skirts, and they were handmade for us. Handmade.
Oh, can I mention the Girl Scouts? Since I took that picture, so that's why I'm not in it. But I'm noticing Shirley Wallace in the front. Let's see, Beverly Brown was in like the third row. Her sister, Lynn. No, I don't see Lynn. Oh yeah, there's Lynn kneeling. And then I just can't remember the young lady in the back. So we pretty much integrated the Girl Scout troop over at Trinity.
So what kind of activities did you do as Girl Scouts?
Okay, we did go camping. And my memory of camping, this has nothing to do with race. Everybody in my tent, one of those big tents, we had the kind of mesh to keep out the mosquitoes. They became afraid and they all ran with the leaders, right? So I was glad because I grew up as an only child, so I couldn't care. I just was enjoying being there by myself, but then the leaders wouldn't let me be by myself, so I had to share with, double up. That was the most miserable night I had. But we learned this group. I can't remember the name of the leader. She lived on 301. I remember that, and her daughter was an older daughter. She had two older daughters. One was in the group, and one was a little older to be in the group. But we got along really well. As I told you, my mother was an assistant leader, so I had eyes, watching out for us. But we went on hikes. We had to do those things to get, to get the little patches for different things. And so I don't know how often we met, but we met regularly, and we did a camping trip, and we all seem to have gotten along during that time. So this would have been in the probably mid 60s, going toward the 70s.
Did you do anything with the Boy Scouts as well?
No. You know what? I don't even know. Did they have Boy Scouts?
Yeah, they had the Boy Scouts, but like my son, he was in the Boy Scouts, but that was much later when everything was really fully integrated. But thinking about during my generation, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, no. Okay. I don't remember that.
And here we are. After you guys have shared all your memories, I want to thank you guys, Evelyn, Pia, Debbie. Thank you for being here. I wanted to make some comments after all your memories that you've shared with us. We celebrated our first African American commissioner in January of 2016. And the first African American mayor in January of 2018. Seems like it took a long time to get there. Now, Evelyn, you had said it wasn't because it wasn't wanted, but more because you didn't want to.
Yes, and I think it's participation. It's the feel of doing your civic duty. And of course, me, I commingle with everyone. I think diversity is one of the best things that you could have in the world, the best feeling that you can get. So I always have my nose in something. So people knew me, and they asked me for years and years to become a commissioner to do that. Now, it's so funny that when I was asked all those years ago, I could have probably got in with no contest. So the time that I said yes, that I would run, what happened? We had three people, uh, ran. And I do believe it's for a reason, because what I do with the town now, I love it. And I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for what we've done these several weeks. It's been really, really a pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I truly enjoy just hearing all the different pieces. I've heard some of the stories before, but each time we get together, we have something new that comes out. It makes me go back and sort of study up and think of how things were back then. Because in my mind, coming at this from an outsider's point of view, I really see like a whole bunch of school names thrown around, and it confuses the heck out of me. So talking to you guys has sort of set me straight on the history of the town. I appreciate that.
And
And
I
I want to
wanted to
thank you
add
too.
that this town hall um, has been placed where the pool used to be. So it's now been totally integrated.
I know. I know. When I saw it, I said, that's the pool. Yeah, but let me just say one thing. My childhood, because I was there from 2 years old to 13, I had a great childhood in Upper Marlboro. No matter what went on, I felt like it was a safe place. At Halloween, a group of us would go around. It was just at the Bucks house, they would try to scare us. But it was, you did things alone. Parents didn't have to travel with you. It was that kind of environment down in Upper Marlboro, the town. But things changed over the decades.
Yes, indeed, Pia. I second that. I agree. Like I say to everyone, I came kicking and screaming, but I am still here. So I agree. I had the best childhood. I wouldn't take it away for anything in the world. And I'm sure Debbie feels the same way, right?
Yeah, I do. I love this town, Upper Marlboro. Uh, during my time, a lot of the younger people didn't like Upper Marlboro because they felt that there wasn't anything to do in Upper Marlboro. They felt like it was an old retirement place for older folks, but I really enjoy Upper Marlboro, even though things and times have changed, but I really like this little town.
Yes, indeed. And something, Patty and Brian, I hope that we can make this, like you say, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 25, because this has been such an enjoyment.
I really appreciate you guys working through these last couple of weekends to get to this point. You guys have been amazing. I want to thank you. Unless there's any other words, I'm kind of wanting to wind this up because it's getting bigger and bigger every second. Cal's going to be killing me for the size. So I'm going to go ahead, stop sharing and stop recording, but we can still keep chatting. Oh my God. Yes, I did record.